Obviously, the Ime Udoka situation is on everyone's mind there. Um, Tell me what your takeaways were from what the Celtics players and coaches were talking about today.
I mean, the thing that really stood out to me, Brian, was that the Celtics players are in as much of the dark about this as everybody else. And I didn't really know what to think of that. I guess it didn't occur to me to think about how much the players might have known or not known, but several of them said they learned about it on social media when our colleague Adrian Wojnarowski first broke the news that Ime Udoka was potentially going to be suspended for a violation of team rules last week. They said they met with the front office, and I assume, they didn't say directly. I would assume it was Brad Stevens and ownership on Thursday, and didn't really get much more than was in the statement that the team put out. And even today, a lot of them are seemingly as much in the dark as everybody else. And, I thought it was noteworthy that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both said they haven't spoke to Ime Udoka since this all went down. Joe Mazzulla, the interim coach, indicated, didn't exactly clearly say it, but indicated he had spoken to Ime Udoka since then. And it was understandably a organization that is trying to come to grips with what has been a pretty chaotic 4 or 5 days, and certainly is not what any of them expected when this news broke. Remember, this broke late on a Wednesday night here on the East Coast. And Marcus Smart said Ime Udoka had been out to LA, had met with the players. Like, they were all thinking things were going to just go into the season as normal. And then, 4 days before training camp, their entire team gets thrown up in the air and all this happens. So that was really what stood out to me, was just the entire group trying to still come to grips with what's happened and then process it and try to move forward into what is one of the most anticipated seasons in the NBA this year. These guys are projected to be an NBA Finals contender to win a potential championship. And now they're doing it with, an interim head coach who's the youngest coach in the league. And, their starting center had surgery. We'll get to that. I mean, there's just chaos all around this team right now.
Okay. So one of the things that came out in, excuse me, one of the things that came out in Wick Grusbach, the team's principal owner, his press conference that he had with Brad Stevens last week, he said that this investigation was several months long. I think he said had been going on for
several
months.
I think several weeks. I think is more a proper
I think he said several months.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure.
But
it wasn't short.
Regardless, it was going on for a while. It didn't start last week.
Right.
And it seemed like the players didn't know about it. It seemed like it was kept very quiet within the organization, which I think that's probably a good thing, because you want to have an investigation done like that, but it creates this sudden change. I mean, you call him an interim head coach. An interim head coach that starts on day one of training camp. That's kind of that kind of is a contradiction in terms.
Yep.
But a coach who, I don't know if he had a chance to even prepare for this concept. How did Joe Mazzulla? I don't even know what his voice sounds like. So I'm gonna have to learn. I know what he looks like, but I'm gonna have to learn what his voice. I don't. It's crazy. His situation. He's well respected within the Celtics organization. He started working there 7 or so years ago for their G League team.
Let me give a real quick breakdown, because it's a little complicated. So Joe Mazzulla played at West Virginia, was part of the Bob Huggins teams, got recruited there by John Beilein. He then spent 5 years working for Division II colleges in West Virginia, a couple different schools. He gets hired by the Celtics.
Where he was the head coach?
Well, he was later. So he was an assistant for 4 or 5 years at 2 different schools, one of them being Fairmont State, which he returned to. Then he went to the G League, worked for the Maine Red Claws, Boston's G League team, in 2016-17. He then goes back to Fairmont State, where he's hired as the head coach. He was the head coach there for 2 years. And then in 2019, Brad Stevens hires him to be an assistant coach with the Celtics. So he has been with the Celtics for the past 3 years. He was with them for a year before that. So he's not a guy that's unfamiliar to the guys here. But yeah, I mean, look, this is a guy who was coaching in a small town in West Virginia 3 years ago and is now coaching a team that a month ago was the favorite to win the championship. I mean, it's a pretty stunning turn of events all the way around.
He's never coached a game on the bench in the NBA. he's always been behind the bench. That's unheard of. He did coach, as you mentioned, in Division II, and he also was their
He also coached Summer League. Yep. He also coached Summer League. Now he's a guy that has had, as you said, has had a lot of respect around the league. The Celtics made a point of keeping him on the staff last year. Ime Udoka essentially hired a brand new staff. Everybody else just about left. He's one of the few guys that stayed. He got a lot of credit for work he did last year during the season. He interviewed with Danny Ainge with the Jazz for their head coaching position, was one of the finalists for that job. And when they hired Will Hardy off of Ime Udoka's staff, they wanted to also hire Joe Mazzulla to be an assistant on Will Hardy's staff, and the Celtics kept him. So they have liked him all the way through. He does have a very calm presence. I thought he acquitted himself pretty well today. He talked about the 2 arrests he had back at West Virginia in 2008 and 2009 when he was in college, and said he's not perfect. He's made mistakes, but he's used those incidents to become a better person as time has gone by. Brad Stevens alluded to the same thing last week when he was asked about the vetting process of hiring Joe Mazzulla in the wake of those incidents. And I think he has a personality that I could see meshing very well with Brad Stevens. He's got a quiet demeanor, confident in himself, said he believes in as much in his ability to do this job as Brad Stevens said last week, but and all the players like him and I think respect him, but it's a huge challenge that he's taken on. And this is an unprecedented situation in many, many ways. And, the Celtics were a team that had, when I did my survey a few weeks ago, they were seen as having one of the best off seasons in the league. They had their top 8 players come back. They traded for Malcolm Brogdon. They added Danilo Gallinari. They seemed to have depth, and they had continuity from last season. They figured things out over the second half of the year. And now all that's been thrown up in the air, and they have to try to figure out how to move forward, not only with an interim head coach, but with Gallinari out for the season and with Robert Williams out for at least the next 3 months with knee surgery. Right. So it's
we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Crazy.
Did the play?
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus.